I'm trying to run alongside of the truck, keep my feet from being dragged, but the faster he goes, the harder that was able for me to keep up with.
Listen up, gang. Lucky Gunner has both fantastic content and great prices on ammo. Enjoy the convenience of online purchase and crazy, super fast shipping. Experience why Lucky Gunner is one of our favorite spots on the Gunternet. Get-asp.com/Lucky Gunner. And while you're there, you'll find MagTech ammunition. MagTech is the exclusive range ammo for the active self-protection team, and we are grateful for their commitment to quality and support. You can buy MagTech ammo at the Lucky Gunner link. Remember to tell them that you heard about them on the ASP podcast. Quick note, gang, you might notice a little bit of audio difficulty with our guest this week. Nothing I could really do. I did my best to make it sound good in post and editing. Did what I could. I hope it isn't too much of a distraction, and enjoy this episode. Alrighty, gang, welcome back to the Active Self-Protection Podcast. I am your host, Mike Williver, your favorite former Fed. With us today, a new friend of mine, a guy I met through my good friend Lucas Underwood, fellow podcaster. Our guest today is Tim Rodifer. Tim is married with children. He lives in Tennessee, a beautiful part of Tennessee. And we are going to learn about an unfortunate incident that happened to him a while back involving someone trying to steal his truck, and him doing his best rodeo impression and trying to get 8 seconds on the truck before it skedaddled. Tim, I appreciate you being on, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So talk to us about what you do for a living and how long you've been doing it. You're in the automotive industry, is that correct?
I am. I grew up in the automotive industry. I started off working in a junkyard and worked my ways up through the ranks and, turning wrenches and, learning and making mistakes and, end up working for a guy that owned a franchise, and kind of a young kid coming in there, and he ended up, not doing so well, but I worked with him for a lot of years, and I ended up taking over that business and worked my way up as a shop foreman, builder, and manager to owning the place. So been there a long time. So I ended up being in that location, I guess, for over 30 years, but I've been doing this now for about 40. And I'm a senior master certified technician, and earned my certifications through, the transmission franchise and the AMCO and the ATSG and, ASE. So just, try to learn as much about the industry as I can, always going out here and participating in all the different seminars that are in our industry as well. Just trying to educate myself on the business system and the technical side and the management side as well. So I spent a lot of years sitting in the classroom, just taking it all in.
Sure.
And so I was, working in my shop when we had a bad situation come about where a young guy, I guess, was looking for an opportunity, and he found one for sure, right? So we
I was gonna ask, the tape that is in question should be up on our main channel. John will be breaking that down, the incident. This happened at your shop, or where exactly did this go down?
Yeah, this was my business. I've probably owned the business now for about 20 years at this point. So okay. Very familiar, very complacent, right? It's kind of, when you're a mechanic that's worked at a shop for a long time, or a technician or an owner, it doesn't really matter. You just, everything just becomes very familiar. You get complacent. It's like your house. Right.
Let me ask you, Tim, would you say you had a self-defense background or aware of self-defense related issues, or something you gave a lot of thought to prior to this incident?
Yeah, I grew up in the streets of Chicago as a young kid, right? So I think that kind of just ingrains that into you. It's definitely a city where you got to be on guard all the time.
Sure.
It can be dangerous, and we were not rich; we were poor, and so it was. We didn't get to live in the best neighborhood, so it was just one of those kind of things. So yeah, it was ingrained in me. I'm always on guard, but when you're a business owner, you got to be on guard a little bit too, because you're watching out for your customers, and you're trying to get the best deals for your customers, but you got to work with technicians and make sure they're doing their jobs. The technicians are sometimes not easy to work with. They can be a little look out. They like to ride the rodeo horses too.
Right. Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, I'm familiar. Yeah, my older brother was a ASC certified master mechanic, and I grew up hanging out with him at his shop a lot. And you know, I'm always very fond of auto mechanics in general. I found a good local place here, and I'm the guy they let back into the shop when they're not supposed to because of insurance regulations. You know, because
Yeah,
I like to joke around with them. Yeah, a good mechanic, a good shop is a good thing to find, and if you find one, folks, hang on to it for dear life.
absolutely. And these guys out there, they're really good guys. Got a lot of respect for them. They're like, I'm the old guy in the shop now, right? So they all call me dad. So, and they are like my kids. So I've they were really concerned when this went down.
I'm sure.
They were, a lot more concerned than I thought. Actually, to be honest with you, also, I've got a very good reputation in our area. I work with a lot of independent repair shops as well, and they're constantly calling me for help and advice. And I've never had the mentality that they're your competition, so kind of separate yourself. Always try to work with them. I was getting calls from them to make sure I was okay.
That's awesome. So talk to us about the time of day and location. The camera shows looks like a lot, maybe like a back lot of a business or a front lot. I'm not sure. What time of day was this? What day of the week? And what were you doing when this guy decided to try to sneak off with your truck?
Well, this was a customer's truck. It was about 5:30 at night. We had already closed, but I think it was a Friday.
Mm-hmm.
We were hanging around the shop because I had just purchased a brand new scanner. Snap-on came out with a new Zeus scanner that was we had just stroked a check for it.
Okay.
And about 5 hours earlier, and the scanner requires in order for it to print, to be put on the Wi-Fi. Well, I didn't mess with it throughout the day. I was going to do it after hours, and that was what I was working on. So I took a customer's car that we had just finished up on repairs, installed a transmission in it, and I was going to reset, the parameters in the vehicle using the scanner, get it all set up on the Wi-Fi, and I walked out to the car, laid the scanner on the seat of the vehicle, and I walked back inside to turn on the printer so that it would connect through the network. And I no more walked inside the door when I caught out of the corner of my eye somebody approaching the vehicle.
So you saw this young man clearly on his way to, I'm assuming, an ice cream social or a Bible study, and
Yeah.
he just happened to notice that you had a vehicle running. So go on from there. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, it was just he just walked up to the car, and of course, again, the complacency. People can say, hey, why would you leave a car with the door standing open? I've had those questions. Why would you leave the keys in the car and things like that? Now the car was not running, but the keys were in the ignition, and the scanner was laying on the seat. And again, it's just a complacency. When you're repairing cars out here, what people don't really realize is a lot of the diagnostic work that takes place is not inside the shop or on a lift. It's a lot of times is behind the steering wheel in the parking lot, right? So you got your machines, everything's Wi-Fi connected, and you're doing your thing. So for me, it was just a normal process of what we do. And I'm up on a hill, so I'm not really right on the beaten path of the main road, even though it is the main road to go to. But I'm up on a hill here in Tennessee because of the mountains. And for somebody to walk up this hill, it was an unusual moment. So it's just not like you have to be guarded in that area. And the parking lot is a fairly large, lot, even though the camera doesn't give all the view of it, but fairly large. And for them just to walk up there, it was just not expected. People driving, they don't walk in.
Right. I just want to point a couple of things out. We've had a lot of controversy on our YouTube channel recently over a video that John, my boss, did about a young man who was in a smoke shop, and a couple of young knuckleheads come in and proceed to start stealing things. One of them jumps the counter with unknown intentions, and our shop clerk or owner, I'm not sure which, gets after him with a pretty sizable knife and stabs him repeatedly. And John's take on that, based on the video, was, it was a little over the top. He kind of held the guy there and kept stabbing him rather than brandishing and threatening and hoping the guy runs away. He got after it right away. And people weren't happy with John's analysis of that. I think John was spot on. Personally, he and I talked about it. And I know people are going to be like, oh, this Tim guy, you know, he, like you said, he left the keys in it and he's asking for it and yada, yada, yada.
Yep.
That's not even remotely true. Or why would he do what he did? He endangered his own life, yada, yada, yada. The point of this podcast, the point of the YouTube channel is to help people to envision an event that happened, to see it with their own eyes, to hear about the people who were in the event and learn from that. So someone now who might be in your position a week from now, you know, in there with just, you know, walking out to their car, starting it in the morning, going, oh crap, I forgot my coffee, running back inside. And now there's someone in their car trying to pull away. What am I going to do? Well, now after talking to you and hearing your story and seeing that video, they're going to have gone over that at least once in their head before it actually happens in real life. So that's what I'm hoping we get out of this. So,
yeah. And, you know, and people are going to have their thoughts about it. And, you know, they certainly have a valid opinion on it. And, you know, and people respond to those moments in different ways. And, you know, I responded in how I was programmed, and we're all programmed differently, right? So I grew up as a protector, and that's just what I was doing. I was trying to protect my customer's vehicle. But, you know, when the young man that when he ended up doing what he did, you know, and the video will kind of show it clearly. But when he did what he did by taking that vehicle out of there like that, when I approached the vehicle, when I first walked out that door, you can see I paused as I'm coming out the door. I didn't take off running right away. It's because I wasn't thinking that this guy was stealing a vehicle. That was not what was in my mind. And my mind was he's trying to steal something out of the vehicle.
like your scanner, for example.
Scanner, exactly. So with that being said, when I seen him close the door, then instantly it just, I guess the, you know, adrenaline kicked in, and the just the reaction aspect of it kicked in. There was not much thought process that kicks in. You know, they'll say firefighters, you know, and you being a former police officer and stuff, you understand. You are just programmed to react, and when bad things are happening, you're running towards the bad things to help, right? And that's the way I am. So I don't run away from problems. I try to assist and help. So when somebody's hurting or whatever, I'm that guy that would be running up towards and trying to do what I can to provide. And that comes sometimes at, you know, obviously of us putting our life in jeopardy. But you know, so be it. That's just how things are. But when I ran up to the vehicle, it wasn't necessarily that I was sitting there thinking that, oh, this guy's stealing the vehicle. It just happened, and I was caught up in a moment before I realized that's what was happening. So that was the thing with this. But he obviously had an intent to get in the vehicle and looking for an opportunity, and he found it, right? So, and, you know, crazy enough, you know, the moment that happened, but a week prior to this, he just got out of jail from doing the same thing to somebody else.
Shocking. You don't say, Tim. I find that absolutely, I'm shocked to my foundations that he was a repeat offender. So let's back up for just a second. So you're in your shop, I assume all the way inside with a closed door between you and the outside. You see the guy walk up. Your initial thought, as you said, was, he's maybe looking to steal something out of the car, maybe steal my scanner. I'm sure it's an expensive piece of equipment. One of the pitfalls of any service trade, whether it's construction, being a mechanic, is tools. You pay a lot of money for these tools, and mechanics usually buy all their own stuff, and it gets stolen. It gets stolen a lot, and it sucks. But, you know, the thieves will target, you know, work vans. They'll target plumbers' vans. They'll target mechanic shops because they know those tools are easy to pawn off, and it's absolutely maddening. But people will steal anything they think they can trade for meth. So in this case, possibly the scanner, but it turns out it was the truck. So you see him get in. As he closes the door, does it dawn on you, okay, maybe he's not just stealing the scanner? Is that when that dawned on you, or was it after that?
The door closing, it wasn't really happening at the moment with me thinking he was stealing the vehicle, even when the door closed, because again, if you look at the video, I mean, I'm hitting the car almost instantaneously upon the door closing. It was just like a seamless transition. So the momentum was already there, right? So I was already running at that point, and within, you know, 20 feet, 15 feet of the vehicle. So I wasn't too far from it. But when I hit the truck, I think there's a couple screenshots that, you know, somebody pulled out, I don't know who it was, where you could see the force of the truck where I hit the door with my head. And I put a 1/2 inch dent in the top of that door jamb. That's how hard I hit that door jamb.
Whoa.
And you can, yeah, you can, and that's it's the top of your door, right? That's a solid piece of metal right there for your head to actually dent that. That shows you how much force I had when I hit that truck.
For sure.
And
I was just going to say too. I'm sorry for our audience who maybe haven't seen this. I just want to be clarified. So you see the guy walk up, get in the truck. As he's closing the door, you jump basically in and halfway through the open window, hitting your head in an effort to prevent this guy from stealing the truck. I guess the next question I have is, once you get settled and you're okay, your head's inside this truck, you're very close to him, obviously, because you're on the driver's side. What are you seeing in that moment? Is he starting the truck? Is he already started? He's putting it in gear. What's happening?
I think it was kind of an instantaneous thing. As he's closing the door, his hands on the ignition switch, and he was starting the truck, right? So it was just kind of one of those real quick moments. And when I reached through going in for the truck, it looked like I was going for his neck because my hands were like out like this. And
wouldn't have blamed you.
Who knows, right? I don't remember. I was just reaching for him. But he was wearing a backpack. So my right hand instantly grabs his backpack because he leans way over towards the passenger seat trying to keep me from getting him. And I grabbed a hold of the strap. And as I'm pulling him back towards me, he puts it in reverse and squalls the tires. And I'm locked in. I got a death grip on that backpack. So I'm committed to the ride at this moment. And I'm trying to run alongside of the truck, keep my feet from being dragged. But the faster he goes, the harder that was able for me to keep up with like that. He ends up jumping a curb. And when he jumps a curb, and of course, again, we're very familiar with the areas that we live and work within. And him jumping that curb, I knew we were in reverse. He had to put it in drive to get out onto the main road. So as he jumps that curb, he had his hands on that shifter and he put it in reverse. But when he leaned way over, he let go of the shifter. Well, I took the shifter with my left hand and I still had a hold of him with my right hand. And I pulled that thing back up in park as we jumped the curb, knowing that it would lock into park once it finally came to a stop going forwards and for him to start going forwards. Well, that moment of him jumping a curb was the exact same time that I pulled it up in park. When he hit that curb, my hand slipped off that shifter. Well, he took that opportunity to grab that shifter again, and this time pull it all the way down low where I couldn't reach around the steering column and grab it.
Do you think that was a conscious decision on his part? Was he smart enough to figure that out, or did he just get lucky and overextend? It was all geeked up on adrenaline and pushed it too far?
I just think it was adrenaline. I don't think he was smart enough to make that decision.
He's probably never used low in his life.
Yeah, he was just making bad life choices, in my opinion. From way back, because this is not the first time he's done this. And so when he pulled that thing down low and started going forwards, being that I have worked there in that location for so many years, I have seen, I almost say at least 15 or 20 head-on collisions off that road where people are coming in and they're pulling out in traffic. And there's no red light there. You have to merge into traffic. It's 5 lanes of 40 to 50,000 cars a day at that time of day going towards Johnson City and Jonesboro, which is the area that we live in. And so knowing that this is the traffic count that's coming through that day and he's going down the hill and there was nothing I can do to stop the car at this point, I made a decision to go ahead and let go of the vehicle, let go of him, so that I would not be hit and crushed in the head-on collision that I felt like was fixing to happen. And that's when bad things happen, right? Because when I let go of that, obviously I fell, and when I tumbled to the ground, the back tire caught my hip, and it flipped me like a rag doll. I have never been whipped around like that before. And it's funny that the newscast people come out, they interviewed me, and I hit my head so hard you could kind of tell that when I was talking with the interview with the local news people,
Right.
I was still dazed.
Sure.
So not thinking too straight. And the hit to the head, was pretty severe. But at the end of the day, I was still thinking okay because of the adrenaline, I believe. But when I let go of that thing, that whipped me around. The news people said that, oh, he had minor injuries. So it was far from minor injuries. Uh, it took me 3 to almost 4 years to recover from the injuries, and to the point that I don't no longer have pain from those moments. But the hip thing, the doctor told me, he says he had no clue how my hip wasn't shattered, having that much weight kind of catch my hip, because it left like a tattoo of the tire tracks on my hip.
You mentioned that, and you'll understand this better than most. I always told my kids when they were learning how to drive, I would tell them, the forces at work on a 2, 3, 4,000 pound motor vehicle are extremely powerful. You don't realize it because modern cars are so quiet, and you get in, it's all soundproofed. But the amount of damage a vehicle can do in any number of different ways. Working under the hood of a vehicle with the engine running is potentially a dangerous thing to do. But man, a car is nothing to mess with. And I guess that kind of brings me to my next question, which is, if this all happened all over again, would you reconsider your actions, or do you think you would do the same thing, and why?
Well, again, without a doubt, I wouldn't change a moment of what happened. Um, the, even to the point of as long as it took for me to recover. Now, granted, I'm not happy that it took that long for me to recover, but hell, I'm an old man now, right? So you don't bounce back as quickly as you did when you were a young
Right.
guy. But I'm still kind of built, tough. I don't smoke, no drink, and try to take care of myself as best as I can. But at the end of the day, I work hard, and so physically I'm pretty fit, and so I think that's had a lot to do with why I didn't get hurt worse than I probably could have, because that thing broke my toes. Uh, you know, the worst part was the broken tailbone. Uh, people that's ever had a broken tailbone, they'll tell you it's probably one of the worst pains that you can ever have,
I've
because
heard.
you do not recover from that overnight. That is a long recovery if you ever recover. And so for that moment of me going through that, and even with the outcome of what it was, I would still do the same thing. The only thing I would like to, uh, you know, have done is just I'd like to see for this kid to have made a better choice, right? I think it's funny, I'm sitting there and I go through all this. The I get run over, and at the moment I get run over, my wife's out there. The people are thinking she's pulling a gun out, because you can see on camera she's pulling something out of her back pocket. It was her cell phone. She thought she was going to get a picture of him or something, and that kind of thing. But it was too fast. It happened way
It's
too
not the
quick.
worst instinct for her to have. Hey, let's see if we can get a picture of
Yeah,
this guy in case he gets away.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
in interest of full disclosure, active self protection would almost certainly tell our viewers and listeners not to jump on a moving car, not to do all these things.
No,
Here's the secret, folks. Me and Tim can disagree on the right course of action and still be friends. Just
yeah.
take a moment. I'm going to have 5 seconds of silence. You can contemplate that for a moment. All right, that wasn't 5 seconds, but you get the idea. We can disagree on this and move along, and probably go have a nice cup of coffee and have a nice
Yeah.
talk. So the next question I would have in this sequence of events is, so this guy throws you off. He takes off. I assume
Mhm.
at some point you guys call the police. Talk about the police response, and when they showed up, what did they do? Were you happy with the way they treated this case?
When you're in there and you're going through the moment, excuse me, I lay there on that road, and I thought I got up instantly. But when you go back and look at the video, I lay there for a second or two, and I guess I got my composure. But I got back up, and I ran to my wife's vehicle. I was going to chase out after him, and at that point, I probably ran 20 feet, 30 feet. I don't even know what it was, but I quickly started feeling the pain kicking in, and knew at that moment I was done. I could not go out after this guy. And even if I could have went out after this guy, what was I going to do? I mean, I'm not a police officer. I ain't got license. It would have been stupid for me even to get in my car and chase this guy down at this point. But again, you're just reacting. You're not making. A rational person would probably not make these decisions that I was doing because I was reacting, not thinking. Right. So, and that's what happened there. So, as I'm getting up, I'm still thinking I'm in the fight and I'm going to go get this truck back because this truck belongs to my customer and I'm trying to protect this customer's car and that kind of thing. But end up finding out after all of it's on and over with, the guy is, well known in the area, but we knew who the guy was because of our Facebook following that we had before the police officers did. Once we disclosed to the police officers who he was, they were clear on and knew all about this guy and everything.
Frequent flyer. Yeah, I remember that.
Yes.
Those guys.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, but they didn't know, obviously, when it first happened who it was because, they haven't seen all the video and that kind of thing. But the point is my daughter put it on our social media for my business, and we were the number one liked automotive shop at that time on Facebook for in the United States. Pretty much, we had like over 10,000 likes.
Wow!
So we had a lot of followers, is what I'm saying. And so when she put it on there, I think within an hour we had identified him through other people. And that's how we found out that he had just gotten out of jail from a very similar moment. And we actually became friends with these people. And they had stolen the van, but nobody had chased him down. It was kind of stolen at night, but he got caught, in their van. But he'd just gotten out of jail for stealing yet another vehicle. And so when the social media thing kicked in, it was just like instantaneous. So that really works well for us in that moment. And so we're able to kind of, know who it was. But, police officers didn't catch him till the following day. And at the following day, he had already totaled the truck that he had stolen. And the customer was obviously not happy about all this. And, they lost their truck. But our insurance paid him for the vehicle more than what the vehicle's worth. So the customer ended up appreciating that aspect of it because we advocated our insurance company for him on those, so we worked hard to get him as much money as we could on that. But the biggest problem was just the amount of money he ended up costing the local business, in my opinion. He cost me about $50,000 worth of insurance claims I had to make, right? He cost me a $20,000 scanner that I had to repurchase. He cost me insurance claims on a truck that a $10,000, $12,000 truck that he ended up towing out. And he tried to sell that scanner for $1,000 somewhere else, locally. So
he knew what it was worth. I mean, he obviously done some research. So otherwise, he would have sold it for
$20,000 scanner purchased that day. He was only selling it for $1,000. So,
but he knew it was worth something. I guess is what I'm saying. He didn't sell it for $50 in a bag of meth.
No, he knew it was worth something.
Yeah.
So all this ended up coming out. The police did their investigation. They all found all this out later on. But it's funny though how things unfold too, because when we did get the scanner back, because it was basically a laptop, he used it as a laptop. So he went in there and I guess I had no clue about this, but there's a private Facebook kind of underground bad stuff happens kind of Facebook group for criminals, and he had logged into that and never unlogged. And police officers, the detectives were they were going through there. And
I'm sure it's a treasure trove.
Yeah, for them it was.
Facebook for dirtbags.
Yeah, so they ended up helping them out on a lot of other cases for sure. So that was the kind of the silver lining in that whole moment. There is at least they were able to help other people, even in this bad situation in here. But so that's kind of the police interaction, and they did a real good job on handling it as best as they could. But it really came down to it. Finding out who he was through social media. But the only negative experience I would have on the police side of it would be the court systems, right? I think we all know they're set up for the criminals, right? So I'm sitting there in court, went to court about 18 times, only to find out it was postponed, 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 postponed. And he's just hanging out in local county jail. And he was supposed to be facing 30 years on the charges of running me over and leaving me on the road for dead, right? But he only got 18 months out of it. And,
Unbelievable. That's unreal, dude.
So it was just, it was unbelievable for me. And as I'm sitting there, finally go through a jury court, and we finally put a end to this. And the jury had weighed in and did their thing, and they basically felt like it was 18 months was a reasonable time for that, which is fine. It's part of it. But at the end of the day, what really bothered me most was the judge after he dismissed the jury, and the young man wanted to apologize to me, and I said, I can, as a God-fearing man, I can accept your apology, but as a human being, I just don't understand it and don't, because I just think that's wrong. You could have made a better life choice and not done this and that kind of thing. Because obviously his public defender, who is being paid for by us, is trying to make it look like I was the one at fault. Well, Mr. Rodifer, had you not done this, would you have not gotten hurt? And my response back to her was this: had he not walked on my property and stole the vehicle, I wouldn't have got hurt.
I'll tell you, I've seen behind the veil of a criminal trial, all the stuff that the defendant, or rather the victim and the jury don't get to see in between, all the times when they're dismissed, and the stuff that goes on would just absolutely blow your mind. And so I take it he pled at some point, or did the jury find him guilty and he was sentenced to 18 months?
No, he was found guilty.
Okay.
And he got sentenced 18 months.
Yeah, Tim, my friend, if it makes you feel any better, I have a good friend who's hopefully going to be on the show soon, federal law enforcement officer who was in a gun battle with a human trafficker who opened fire on them with a rifle and shot through the windshield of my old friend's car. And that guy was caught and charged with assault, not attempted murder, but aggravated assault. So it's not just you know what I mean? I'm not sure what to do about it, because we can't arrest and incarcerate our way out of every problem that we have. However, someone who in 2 seconds graduates from property crime, felony theft, to aggravated assault, robbery, and assault with a motor vehicle, potentially attempted murder, at least aggravated assault. That's a different thing. And he, you made a decision to try to save your customer's truck. Well, he made a decision to instead of jumping out the passenger seat and running away, he made a decision to put it in gear and endanger your life. So this guy should have been gone for a lot longer than 18 months, in my opinion. I'm sure the opinion of many of our listeners. And that brings back up the issue of, well, Mike, why would you say you wouldn't have jumped on the car? Aren't we sick of crime? This is an individual decision, folks. Some people are going to do what Tim did. Some people are going to do what I recommend. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in between. And the fact is, the purpose of a show like this is for you to get that mental rep in, for you to go, okay, well, if this, then what? If this happens to me, what am I going to do? And you've heard from Tim. You've heard what potentially could happen. It could have gone a lot worse. Thank God it didn't. What potentially could happen if you try to intervene like that, and consider your options. That way, if this happens to you, God forbid, you're not coming at it like Tim was, from a completely blind perspective of not knowing, not having considered this, and having to just react all of a sudden. So is this guy still in jail, or no? Is he out already?
No, he's definitely, no, he's in jail for other unrelated charges to me.
Again, shocking, Tim. I'm shocked.
Yeah, he's still in jail for that. So thank God for that. But at the end of the day, I really do think it's just about, people just making a lot of bad life choices and not having the right influences in their life, and that kind of thing. And I think that's the reason why some of these things do happen. When it was done and over with, and jury was dismissed, the really sad part to me I got scolded from the judge. The judge, he basically said, Mr. Rodifer, he says, I think there was a lesson learned here today. And I thought he was talking about the young guy there.
Oh, boy.
And he says, did you learn a lesson? And I said, what lesson would that be? He says, "You won't do that again?" I said, "No." I said, "I probably would." I said, "Because that's just who I am." I said, "But however," and no, I didn't tell him this, but after it was over with, I'm sitting there thinking, however, I wouldn't recommend doing it.
Right.
This is not something I would sit there and say, yes, go ahead and do this, because the result is it's a much bigger problem than that. I mean, I could have gotten killed for sure. And let me assure you one thing. When I was on that truck and it was riding down that hill and I knew that the traffic were fixing to hit, I thought, yeah, 100% that I was going to die. There was no doubt in my mind on
Oh,
that.
I believe it. I don't doubt it for a second.
So that was at that time, I guess. I'm not sitting there contemplating my life at that moment. I'm sitting there, looking back upon those things. I'm sitting there, that was just a stupid, stupid mistake. But at the end of the day, it was the choices I made, and given to do it again, I probably would do the same thing, because that's just how I'm hardwired. But 100% would never recommend that to anybody, because it was dumb. It was not a smart movement. It's a truck, it's a piece of equipment. You file insurance on these things, you move on. Even if you don't have insurance, you still move on because your life's more important. So those are the things that is more important. But when you're reacting, you're not thinking through all that. And being in Tennessee, I'm a big gun guy, right? So I carry guns, and I wasn't carrying that day. And my buddies and stuff would say, "Well, Tim, why didn't you pull your gun out?" And I'm like, I'm not Rambo,
Right.
and I may target practice a little bit. I'm not a hunter, but the point is that even in those moments, you're not thinking about pulling guns out. You're just reacting, and that's all I was doing, is reacting. So I wasn't really doing anything defensively. I was just reacting to the moment. So it was just instincts at that point. So not what you wouldn't have never thought of a gun, and I don't know who would ever would have. When you're being a 10-second, 15-second, 20-second moment, it's happening. You're just really reacting. So for me, it was just a matter of, let go of the truck and hope I don't get run over, but yet did a little bit, obviously, and deal with the ramifications afterwards.
Better get a little bit run over than a lot run over. I mean, if you had to choose one or the other. Let me go back for a moment to what that judge said. God bless our judicial system and our justices and our judges and our magistrate judges, but they love to make pronouncements from their high bench up there. And can I just say how unhelpful that comment from him was to you? Like, you needed to hear that after this guy just got a slap on the wrist for potentially almost killing you. There's one of my favorite commentators likes to say, two things can be true at the same time. We need to be able to open up our minds to this and have the cognitive dissonance and understand that, look, there's a time where, jumping on the truck was potentially an unwise thing to do, but you were just reacting in the moment. At the same time, hey, criminals are getting let out of jail left and right. Like, it's cool. I mean, all over. DAs are not prosecuting crimes. It's an absolute epidemic. And so people are fed up and they've had it with this sort of thing. And the response to that video I talked about with John is a good indication that people are like, well, shouldn't have jumped the counter, wouldn't have gotten stabbed. And I understand that completely. I totally get that. But there's room in our brains for two things at one time. One is guys like Tim just react in the moment and try to protect their customers' stuff. And the judge making a comment like that after the sentencing was wholly inappropriate and not helpful. You didn't need to hear that. And I'm sorry he said what he said, because, like I said, I'm repeating myself at this point, but it's just not helpful. You were through a very traumatic experience, a very unpleasant experience. And I think, you acted in the moment. And I think that speaks volumes about your character, about your care for your customers, about your values, about the kind of person you are. Was there anything about this, Tim, you wanted to discuss or touch on before we part ways?
No, I mean, I just think, again, just what we already talked about already is, certainly, like I said, I have been interviewed many times in the past over this, and every time I do one, the message that I definitely want to make sure that I convey is, don't get out here and do this, and it's not something that I would recommend. But understand this, right or wrong, there's people out here that are just programmed to be those protectors in life, and they're going to do these things. That's how they react, and that was just who I was. That's how I grew up, and I'm just don't. At the end, the other thing too is I don't want the gentleman that did what he did to ever sit there and think that I was ever a victim to his decision, because I wasn't,
Right.
And so, he just, he made a bad decision to do what he did. I made a bad decision to try to stop him. But at the end of the day, it was just, me doing what I thought was the right thing. I just got caught up in a moment, and, I'm not going to run from it. I was committed.
Yeah. Well, his bad decision was based on greed and laziness, and your decision was based on a sense of justice and trying to do the right thing and prevent your customer from losing their vehicle. So at the end of the day, man, I'm so glad. I'm sure my listeners are so glad that you're okay, that you've got through this. And I hope that your business continues to thrive. I wish this was a audio video podcast. People could see the awesome stuff behind you. One day I will have a cool setup like that behind me, so I can make this a video podcast. It'll be interesting to look at. Right now, it's just my big fat head in the middle of a screen.
40 years of owning automotive shops and a lot of stuff being bought.
Very cool. Man, Tim, I can't thank you. Thanks so much for being on. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
All right, again, you know what time it is. Our main interview is over, and now it is time once again for the Gutowski Files, featuring Stephen Gutowski. He is the founder of TheReload.com. That is TheReload.com, and the host of the Weekly Reload podcast. Back with us once again. Stephen, thanks so much for being here, buddy.
Yeah, it's a very creative name for the segment, by the way.
You like that?
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I was a kid watching the Rockford Files, and somehow the Gutowski Files just rolls off the tongue.
I think it's very descriptive.
Yes. Well, it does paint a mental picture. I think if people have never seen you on your YouTube channel or on TV, might imagine you a square-jawed, like private detective type, maybe a fedora, press pass stuck into it. You know what I mean? A pencil and paper, taking notes and, holding powerful people to account, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. Yes.
Hopefully we never go video, because nobody wants to see my face for 45 minutes. And Stephen is a handsome man, but that will shatter the illusion anyone might have of what you look like.
Long flowing hair.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this week we are discussing a member exclusive over at TheReload.com. Member exclusive is available only to members, so they get a little extra content if you sign up over there, which I highly recommend you do. The title of this article, written by our reporter, Stephen Gutowski, is Analysis: AR-15 Bans Are Floundering in Court. And this is something we talked about. I think it was last week we talked about the Colorado case where the federal judge put a temporary restraining order or a stay, I can't remember which one it was, on a local sort of county-wide assault weapons ban. Colorado being not unique, but different than most states in as much as they can have local and county laws that are different than the state law. So what else is going on with this general topic, Stephen? Talk to our listeners about that.
Yeah, so obviously that ruling came shortly after another local Colorado assault weapons ban, or AR-15 ban, essentially, was also put on hold by a different federal judge. Both of whom, by the way, were Democratic appointees, which is another interesting point. One was a Biden appointee, one was an Obama appointee, and they both using the Bruin standard that the Supreme Court just put down a couple months ago in their gun carry case out in New York, using the standard that the court articulated in that case. These two democratically appointed federal judges have blocked two local AR bans in Colorado, and that sends a pretty strong signal about how things are going to go for so-called assault weapons bans throughout the country, I think.
Stephen, real quick, could you just explain to our listeners? Some of them might not be super aware of what's going on. Talk to them about Bruin really quick and what that ruling was and what it meant, so we can get some context.
Yeah, certainly. So the Supreme Court ruled that New York's subjective standard for issuing concealed carry permits was unconstitutional, violated the Second Amendment. But more importantly, because you can tell what we're talking about now is not a gun carry case, right? We're not talking about a gun carry law. We're talking about a ban on sales of certain guns. So how are these two things connected, right? Well, more important than the direct ruling in Bruin on the gun carry law is how the Supreme Court now tells lower courts the way that they should consider all gun laws moving forward, which is effectively to um, look at the Second Amendment text, see if it violates the Second Amendment text.
What?
If it does, if it implicates the text of the Second Amendment, if the conduct that's used, so obviously buying and selling guns would be in that category. Then you have to take a look at whether or not there is a tradition of regulating this kind of conduct in really dating back to the American founding. And you're really only allowed to use the time period between the 14th Amendment's adoption after the Civil War and the founding and some of the history before the founding, that early American history and English common law history play some role in that analysis. But that's the time period you're looking at, and you have to find a law that is substantially similar to the modern regulation, right? And so, one thing would be, just did they have this exact law back during the late 18th century, early 19th century? And if not, did they have something that was similar to it, right? That was trying to accomplish the same goals. And so if you don't find anything like that, the law is unconstitutional. And so that's the standard that both of these federal judges in these Colorado cases have used to block the enforcement of these bans. And this matters a lot because I think the assumption was for a long time after the Supreme Court had a landmark ruling in Heller back in 2008, right? And it incorporated that ruling to the states because that one was against the DC's government, which is actually regulated by the federal government. It's not its own.
Yeah, it's unique, in that way.
Yeah, it's not its own separate state or anything. And so they incorporated, this is where the 14th Amendment comes in. The Bill of Rights has been incorporated to the states. These protections that are in the federal Constitution have been incorporated to protect people against state laws as well. And so that happened in 2010 with McDonald, which is another case people might have heard of. But and so that's, the 14th Amendment is the one that guarantees equal protection of law, right? And so that includes the rights in the Bill of Rights. And so that's why that history matters from the founding era to the era of the 14th Amendment. And after Heller, a lot of lower courts gun rights advocates criticized them for sort of ignoring what the Supreme Court was saying in Heller when it, presented its first stab at what the Second Amendment actually means in practice. And so a lot of people expected that after Bruin, which we just got, lower courts would again try to sort of sidestep what the Supreme Court is, at least the more liberal ones, right? And you're not seeing that yet. What you're seeing instead are these kinds of rulings from these federal judges in Colorado. And the other important point here is that nobody has yet been able to articulate in court a defense of an assault weapons ban under this new Bruin standard. So these two cases in Colorado, you didn't have the governments there even make the case for why their laws shouldn't be enjoined, pending more legal action. You haven't seen Maryland respond in their case to give their reasoning for why their law withstands this Bruin scrutiny. And California filed a brief in their case, but in their brief, mainly they asked for more time to look for these sorts of historical analogs. Right. They didn't actually point to any. They said, well, there's a history of banning dangerous and unusual weapons, and so that we think that our assault weapons ban is in line with that. Of course, there's a problem being that the AR-15 is the most popular rifle in the country, so it's not particularly unusual, but they couldn't point to any particular laws, or they didn't at least try to point to any particular laws from that period of history that the court's concerned with, that they argue are similar. Instead, they wanted to wait. They wanted to get more time to try and consult with experts to find examples, which the federal judge in California's case didn't allow them that extended period. That they wanted to wait until next year to be able to offer up their defense of their law, and instead they're going to have to do it in a much quicker time frame than that. So all this combines, at least in my view, right? This is an analysis piece, so it's where I'm trying to break down, these news stories and why they matter and what they mean, beyond just the hard news facts. Obviously, mostly in this segment, we focus on just talking about what's happening, and most of the reload, your free content is mostly that news reporting. But most of our paid content is like this, where we break down why these things matter, why these stories matter, what's going on with them, what do they mean. And in this case, it all adds up to paint a very grim picture for these assault weapons bans across the country.
Thank God.
They probably aren't going to survive scrutiny under the Bruin standard, or at least nobody has come up with a very good, or any, frankly, defense of these laws under this standard, which matters a lot because that's the standard they're all supposed to operate under now. And you're seeing even democratically appointed lower court judges start to operate that way. We'll see how places like the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals react. That's still a little ways down the line. You'll probably get that ruling at the district court level in California's case. That judge had previously struck down California's assault weapons ban, so he's very likely to do that again, now that the case has been remanded. So after Bruin, another thing the court did was it granted 4 different cases, then it vacated the rulings in them and remanded them back down to lower courts to have them heard again underneath this new Bruin standard.
Right.
And so 2 of those cases, the Maryland and California case I was just talking about, 2 of those cases dealt with assault weapons bans and are now being re-litigated after what the court laid out. So, it'll be a little while before we get a final understanding of where the appeals court level's going to go with these cases, but it's very likely that the California cases, that their law is again going to be declared unconstitutional by this judge. Roger Benitez is his name, out in California. He's done a lot of their federal gun law cases out there, and then it'll go back up to the Ninth Circuit's Court of Appeals, maybe to the full panel. That's usually in the past where these laws have been upheld, even if they've been struck down at lower levels. The court at the full court in the Ninth Circuit is sort of notorious for being very left-leaning and for upholding essentially every gun law that has ever been challenged before them. And so we'll see how they react to this new standard. But for now, things look really bad for AR bans, magazine bans, those sorts of modern gun control laws.
Yeah, it looks grim for them. It looks good for freedom-loving Americans everywhere. I worked for over 2 decades in Southern California as a federal agent, and I can tell you, kind of a running joke was our running theme was whatever case we're presenting, just we didn't want it to reach the Ninth Circuit, whatever else happened, like just hopefully get resolved before it gets that far. Earlier, you mentioned, Stephen, that the Heller ruling, a lot of lower courts tried to work their way around it or ignore it, and that's not really apparently happening now under Bruin. I know you're not an attorney, but you're very knowledgeable about this sort of stuff. If you had to guess, what would you say is the reason that this Bruin decision seems to be resonating with these lower courts, and they're not apparently, at least initially, they're not trying to mess with it. They're just sort of going with it. Is it the way it's written? Is it something about the opinion itself, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with the way it's written. Certainly, Second Amendment litigation in federal courts is basically brand new. Like I mentioned, Heller, that landmark decision, that was 2008.
Mm.
And obviously for a very long time, there weren't any federal gun control laws, not until the 20th century.
As it should be.
And for a long time, the federal constitution was viewed as only being restrictive to the federal government. And so if the federal government doesn't have any gun laws, then there's none to challenge under the federal constitution. And so this started to change, obviously, in the 20th century, and you started to see what's called incorporation, where as I mentioned earlier, the Bill of Rights in the federal constitution starts to become what they call incorporated to the states, meaning that they'll protect First Amendment rights from state laws, not just federal laws, and so on and so forth. And this is a long process that's gone on in the federal courts. But so there just wasn't a lot of litigation on guns in the federal courts until very, very recently. And so Heller itself, too, does not really set out a specific standard on how to judge gun cases. It dealt with a law that was very novel. It was a total ban on all ownership of handguns, which there were really only two of those in the whole country, in DC and in Chicago. There may have been one or two other ones in some towns elsewhere, but it wasn't a very popular policy, right? At least in theory, you could buy a gun legally in every state and nearly every city. And so there wasn't a lot of like direct application of this ruling, which dealt directly with total bans on handguns, and didn't really give a specific guide on how to handle any other gun cases. And so that left the lower courts to kind of fill in those gaps, which is not a totally uncommon thing, right? The Supreme Court is there. There's only so many cases they can take every year. And so they look for areas of law where disagreements have developed in the lower courts. And so part of litigating in federal courts is like building that record. And that's another reason why you'll often see, like, we just published a story about a gun rights group filing a bunch of cases against assault weapons bans all over the country, in Hawaii, Illinois, Connecticut. And so they'll try to target different areas of the country because there are a bunch of different circuits out there. And so usually the Supreme Court will take a case once there's a split between different circuits. So they come out different ways on different issues. And so for a long time with gun rights, the lower courts had developed their own test that because Heller didn't really outline a very specific way of judging gun laws in the future. It really was just about establishing the very basics of what the Second Amendment means. If it means anything, it must mean that individuals can keep the most popular kind of gun, which in this case was a handgun, the most popular category of gun, for self-defense inside their own homes, right? That was the bottom line of Heller. And so if you're not restricting that, right, there isn't really a direct path to challenging it easily. And so all these other gun cases that came up in the meantime were the lower courts had to develop their own way of trying to figure out how to judge these cases. And so they came up with a two-part test that most gun rights advocates, and indeed the court itself, especially Clarence Thomas, criticized as basically treating the Second Amendment as a second-class right, that it essentially defaulted to a lower level of scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny, and that as long as the government had some interest in regulating guns, that it could articulate that it would be their laws would be upheld in most of the lower courts. So now the big difference is Bruin goes through at length and describes how exactly the court wants the lower courts to decide these cases moving forward. And it has this whole standard about looking at the history and tradition of gun regulation in the United States. That, Clarence Thomas said in Bruin, the two-step test that had been developed by lower courts was one step too many, and that they should just be looking at whether or not the law conflicts with the Second Amendment, and then whether if it does in any way, then it's unconstitutional unless there has been some tradition of this kind of regulation of guns in American history.
Stephen, I appreciate the analysis. This is why you folks need to go over to thereload.com and carefully consider getting a membership. Stephen, this is all he does. He pays attention to this stuff, so you don't have to. No, I'm just kidding. So that you can go to his site and see what's going on. And if he doesn't have enough membership, he can't keep this thing going, and we need this thing to keep going. He's the only person doing what he's doing, as near as I can tell, in the way that he's doing it, keeping politics out of it, only where it's absolutely necessary. Does anything become political? Over there, it's all very neutral and very fact-based. It is sane, sober, down-the-middle reporting. TheReload.com. TheReload.com. Please consider going over there and getting a membership. Stephen, once again, I know you'll stay on this story and the others and get back to us with any updates, and I appreciate you being here. Thanks, buddy.
Absolutely.
Hey, friends, this is John Correa. If you like the podcast, if it is bringing you value, do me a favor, leave us a rating and a review. It really helps us out.